Thanks everybody for coming out. I know there's a lot going on. Can you hear me okay on the other side? All right, so I'm Miranda Marraccini. As you just heard, I've been the librarian at the Horological Society of New York, or HSNY as we call it, for about 2 years now. And yes, this is Carolina Navarro, who's the Deputy Director of HSNY, and she is also an excellent person to ask about things related to the organization as a whole. So I'm going to be talking about the original library of HSNY and then its transformation in the past few years and our vision for the library going forward. So there's kind of 3 parts to the talk. For those of you who might not be familiar with the Horological Society of New York, we're a 501c3 nonprofit. We're dedicated to advancing the art and science of horology through education. We hold monthly lectures. We provide scholarships to watchmaking students. And we operate classes where amateurs and beginners can learn how a watch works, how to take it apart, how to put it back together. And we also do those in different cities, as some of you have heard who have come by our booth over in the Mart. And feel free to take a brochure so you can learn more about us, and definitely stop by if you're in New York. But even if you're not, you'll be sure to find something of interest. All right, so the original library. So HSNY is actually a very old organization. We were founded in March 1866 by a group of German immigrants. And we were known as the Deutscher Uhrmacherverein, German Watchmakers Society. So forgive me if your German is better than mine. I know my pronunciation is none of the best. So the German Watchmaker Society included only working watchmakers, and members would pay into a fund to support each other if somebody couldn't work, like a guild. Before the 20th century, evidence exists that HSNY had a library right from the beginning of when we were founded. We have a history that was written in 1916 that says the society had a technical library within a few years of its founding. And in this picture, you can see an early library stamp. That's the blue marks on the right side. And it shows the book was the property of the New Yorker Uhrmacherverein, which is a variation of our name that we used from 1887 until about 1916. So this book was definitely in our library sometime between 1887 and 1916. And you can see that by the stamps on the right. But then there are also some other layers of stamps, and I'm going to go over those. On the left side is a later one that shows that it was in our library later in the 20th century. So this is a membership card or advertisement from around 1887 in German. Don't worry, I'm not going to ask you to read German. But this part that I've highlighted right here says that the organization has a, quote, specialized library open at no charge to all members, one of the most complete in the German language. It also contains almost all the more recently published technical literature in the English language and is being added to regularly. So this is 1887. We know we have a library in German and in English already. By 1891, we know we got $365 worth of books and periodicals in the library, which is equivalent to around $12,000 or $13,000 today. So a pretty good sized collection, even in 1891. And then in 1901, we know that a member donated a collection of 215 technical books to the library. So there were at least 215 books in 1901. So moving forward a little bit into the mid-20th century, which is the sort of next era that I have some evidence for. These are some lists of books in our library. The one on the left is from the 1940s. The one on the right is from the 1960s. The books that we had in our library were mostly technical, and some of them could be checked out. And some examples of books are, I'll give you the titles, and if you want more info on the exact books, I can tell you later. But some of the titles are Prize Essay on the Balance Spring, An Analysis of the Lever Escapement, Treatise on Modern Horology, Rules and Practice for Adjusting Watches, The Chronograph, Its Mechanism and Repair, and Electrical Timekeeping. So you can kind of see the type of books that were in the library. They were very practical. They were meant for working watchmakers. And as I mentioned, a lot of them could be checked out so that they could consult with them, on the bench. The position of librarian was filled at that time by a volunteer member. The library was only open on days when the members were having a meeting, so once a month in the evening, basically. And members could check out books, except for during the summer. A notice in 1955 bragged about having, quote, Library of Congress index cards. So it's clear that somebody was doing some cataloging on the library and that it was a functioning library, even if it was maybe only open a few hours a month for people to use the books. And just for members, of course. Well, where were the books is another question. Where was this library? Well, it wasn't stationary. It moved around, basically. It moved around through different rooms in hotels. I don't mean like a hotel room with a bed, but I mean like a rented office in a hotel, mostly in Midtown. So actually, I don't know how much you guys know about the jewelry trade and the watch trade in New York, but it started out at the southern tip of Manhattan in an area called Maiden Lane. So there was Maiden Lane and Nassau Street and a couple other streets where the jewelers and watchmakers all operated, and that was just at the bottom of Manhattan. But then in the middle of the 20th century, it moved up. So now and then, the center of the watch and jewelry trade in New York is basically 47th Street or the Diamond District in Midtown Manhattan, which is actually very close to our current library and office on 44th Street in Midtown Manhattan. So we're still kind of in the center of the jewelry and watch trade in New York. And our library kind of mirrored that. The first known location of any of our meetings was downtown near Maiden Lane, and then it kind of moved up, and in the 20th century, in the mid-20th century, it was all happening in Midtown at different kind of hotels and locations in the middle of Manhattan. So you can see evidence for the library's continued relevance and operation in our monthly newsletter, which is called the Horologist Loop. This publication has been going since 1938, and we still issue it today in email form, so I definitely encourage you to sign up on our website if you ever want to. I also write monthly articles about the library, which I'm going to be mentioning later in this talk. But I wanted to quote some issues of the Horologist Loop, and also you can look at these old issues on our website as well if you're ever interested in. So I had so many to quote from that were about the library that I included a couple on this slide and then a couple more that I'm going to mention here that are not the same ones. So if you're not seeing the things that I'm saying out loud, they're not on this slide, but they're just different quotes about the library. From May 1966 in our newsletter, members, the library is open every meeting night from 7:30 p.m. until the end of the meeting. You are welcome to borrow books or read them in the meeting room. This is your library, all in caps, and it is here to help you with any problems or to give you information on all aspects of horology. But returning library books was definitely a problem from the start. I don't know if you all struggle with this too. I am a librarian and I struggle to return library books on time. So I know that it's hard and a lot of people really mean to and they still don't. So here are some quotes from the Horologist Loop about returning library materials. From May 1964. Our librarian would like to remind all members who borrowed books that these have to be returned at the following meeting. A fine of 25 cents to $1 will be charged for books kept longer than 1 month, depending on the type and age of the book. Visit our library before every meeting. It is the most comprehensive collection of books on horology. They are for your benefit kept in the safe, but readily available upon request. So that was another interesting detail I found, that the books were mostly kept in a safe, kind of to keep them safe, I guess. Some of the ways that I know how people were using these books is from inscriptions in the actual books, some of which we still have. So they kind of show how members were using the books, reading the books, and really just like relying on them. This one on the left you can see is signed by the author, Walter Kleinlein. And the one on the right has an old inscription from Benjamin Melanoff to Max Epstein in 1944. And that's that top one there. Melanoff was the president of the Horological Society from 1936 to 1937. Max Epstein was an instructor at the Bulova School, and he was a frequent lecturer at the Horological Society. He died. Then Mrs. Max Epstein donated the book to the Horological Society in memory of her beloved husband in March 1955, and that's the inscription in the middle there. So you can see kind of generations of people using and valuing this book. These are some other stamps and books. There are many of them, many types of stamps, many types of marks. One of them you can see here, this one right here is an inscription from Henry Freed. Henry Freed was an HSNY president in the 1940s and 50s, And he wrote 14 books on watchmaking. He taught watchmaking in a lot of places, including the New York City public schools. And he wrote, as you can see here, to the Horological Society of New York, may this remain in circulation, underlined, for a long time. So he was really keen for people to keep using this book, and that's why he donated it. So I have been reconstructing this library in our library now. I found about 80 books from this original list, one of the original lists that I have. And there are even a few that were sold at some point and then ended up coming back to us later. I'm going to be telling you a lot about Mr. Fortunat Müller-Marchi, who I know many of you know. He ended up buying some of these books and then donating them back to us. So our original library is slowly coming back together, and I'm kind of reconstructing it from our massive quantity of books and making a new kind of model library of what our organization used to be. But more on this later. And I just want to mention that if you ever find a book that you think might have been part of our library, it has one of our stamps, one of these many interesting marks here. We would love to know about it. So yeah, email us, let us know if you ever find anything that you think was part of our original library. So I don't have a ton of concrete information about where the books in our library were between around the 1960s and the 1990s. But I'm told that for some period they were at the Bulova School in Queens, New York. And then when the school closed, which was in the 1990s, HSNY member Charles Solomon rushed over with a van to save the books from being thrown out. So he picked them up and brought them back to his Riverside Memorial Chapel. So HSNY would have been homeless if it wasn't for Charlie Solomon. So Solomon's been an HSNY member since 1981. He's a current fellow, and he's a former treasurer and trustee. And Charlie graciously offered his Riverside Memorial Chapel as the Society's meeting place from 1995 through 2016. So this is a picture of the books that were stored in the closet at the chapel. You can see that in addition to a lot of the older books, there are a number of more recent volumes. So there are a ton of Bulova technical manuals here. And there's also some books visible about things like repairing quartz watches and things that were more recent topics back in the 1980s and 90s. Now I'm going to move on to the last few years, a new era. So many of you do know Fortunat Müller-Marchi, and I don't think I need to tell you what a wonderful man and an important collector he is. And I know that he's also been an important presence at the NAWCC for many, many years. And of course, at the library at the NAWCC Museum and Headquarters is named after him. But in addition to all his work for the NAWCC, he also amassed a private library of 25,000 items, not just books, but it's an incredible collection of ephemera, periodicals, audiovisual materials. It's in many, many languages, including, of course, English, German, and French, but also Japanese, Portuguese, Spanish, Chinese, and a bunch of other languages. So it's a pretty amazing private collection, and he kept it very well organized at his house in New Jersey. I never saw it at its original location, but I've seen pictures and heard about it. He wanted his books, though, to be accessible by a lot of people, and so he officially donated his collection to us in 2019. Around the same time, very fortuitously, a space became available at this building. It is the General Society of Mechanics and Tradesmen building, which is a historic building in the heart of Manhattan's Club Row. It's right across the street from the Harvard Club, and it is also right by the New York Yacht Club and the Algonquin Hotel. So this is a 19th century building. Our library is here with the lights on the 5th floor. It was originally a boys' school in the 19th century, and then it was bought by the General Society of Mechanics and Tradesmen, which is another nonprofit that's been around since 1785. And they still teach plumbing, air conditioning, construction classes in this building for free to people in the trades. And they rent out different space to nonprofits, including us. They also film a lot of TV shows and movies here, so you might see it around. So we were already holding classes in the same building when the library space became available in 2019. But with the interruption of the COVID pandemic, it took a couple of years to get everything from Fortunat's collection moved and organized. And again, this is before I joined, but I've gotten these pictures from Carolina to show what it looked like when they were moving everything from Fortunat's library into this space, which was a mammoth effort. So Fortunat is still a regular visitor to our library. I don't know how well you know him, but he has a great time coming in, visiting his former books, seeing how people are actively using his collection and drinking Diet Cokes. We're so lucky to have him around. We continually consult with him about the collection and how we can add to it and improve it. We did have a grand opening. I know there was some NAWCC people at it too. This was October 21st, 2022. Fortunat decided to name the library after his personal hero, Joost Burgi, who lived from 1552 to 1632. Burgi was a brilliant Swiss clockmaker who contributed significantly to astronomy and horology and mathematics. He's one of the discoverers of the logarithm, among other things. And we had some attendees at this event from the Joost Burgi Initiative, Dr. Peter Fuchs and Dr. Joost Schmid-Lanter, who you can see in the picture there. The Joost Burgi Initiative has been endeavoring for some years to give Burgi's person the historical appreciation to which he is entitled. So they were really excited to attend the event and to have Joost Burgi's name on our library officially and forever. And here's us cutting the ribbon. We actually did it. We did a giant scissors. We did all the pomp and circumstance of having a grand opening. And it was a really fun event. All right, so into the weeds a little bit. I don't know how interested you all are in cataloging, so I'm not going to go into extreme detail, but you can ask me questions later. The record on the left is from Fortunat's online database, which is called the Bibliographia Horologiae Mundi, which he created with the late Bob Holmstrom. So this is an existing online database of basically everything in his personal library and some stuff in a couple other people's libraries. And on the right is a record for the same book for our online library catalog, which is available on our website. And I'm not going to go through every line in this record, but the reason that I highlighted things is because I wanted you to see that we took great pains to preserve all of the information that Fortunat included in his database, while doing things like regularizing the spelling and making it more searchable and making the format interchangeable with other libraries around the world so that someone can look up a book in a library in WorldCat, the online library database, and see that it's in our collection in New York. So a lot of this work of cataloging was done by Audra Zimmerman, who is a professional cataloger who worked for us on a contract basis. And I'll just say the orange highlights are Fortunat's keywords that he put in. You can see he's got historic physics and optics, and we have them here, historic physics and optics. And the magenta part is Fortunat's note about what the item is. So he says, English language reprint of the most famous work of Huygens on optics from 1678. And we have kept that word for word. And then the yellow is the number that Fortunat assigned to the item. So he would assign items chronologically based on when he acquired it. So we have preserved that number here. But one thing that's different is that we've added a Library of Congress call number, which again is kind of a standardized method for organizing and locating books. They'll be organized by topic in our library. So if someone is interested in researching a particular topic, all the books on that topic will be close to each other. And of course, organized within that topic too. But it just is a way of making our library more interchangeable and more available to researchers around the world and connected to other libraries. So as I mentioned, this library catalog is now online and searchable. We're always adding to it. So if there's something that you don't see in there when you're looking, just email me. I'm very contactable and say, hey, do you have this? And I will go ahead and look. Because it's a big job, I'm going to go into it, and I would not say that everything in our library has been cataloged. It is online. So now I'm just going to talk a little bit about how we're using the library today. So classes. We've had a lot of classes come into the library, which has been really great. You can see some of the different schools and universities that people have come from. Some of our professors return with their classes every year or every semester. There are a surprising number of classes in New York City in the area that are about time, philosophies of time, physics, sometimes students who are designing their own timepieces. So I don't mean like a physical watch, but like online or digital visualizations of having to do with time. Quite a lot of them are artists and computer programmers. The library is also an exhibit space here. So you can see in those cases, some of the students are looking at an exhibit, our previous exhibit, which is called Pocket Genius, the watch collection of Alex Koo. So some of you might have seen that. It was a collection of incredible, important pocket watches that Alex Koo lent to us. He is a San Francisco-based collector, and we had that exhibit up through December of last year. Right now, we have an exhibit on Seiko and Japanese horology in our library. So we have some really important early Seiko clocks and watches, as well as some more recent Grand Seiko. We have the first ever quartz watch. We have some Japanese wadoke that tell time using traditional methods. So if you're in the area, that's the exhibit we have right now. We also have group tours. So that's a chance for just the members of the general public to learn about horology. You can see in this picture, I've brought out some rare books so that people can understand what were the most important books and also like just get a feel for what books were like in the 18th century. Yeah, these ones are Berthoud Treatise on Horology book. So there's Nick, our executive director, Nick Manousos, talking about, I believe, longitude. And our group tours are always open to the public and free. So I like to bring out the rare books. Like I mentioned, our oldest book is from 1573. I just acquired it recently. And it is the first book published in Italian about the astrolabe. So it's a very interesting early book. And I got it from formerly the collection of Silvio Bedini. His books were sold off, and that was one of the things I acquired from that collection for our library. So we are also a fully functioning research library with a librarian on staff Monday through Friday, 10 to 5. So we get a lot of PhD researchers and professors. On the left is Paul Laurie, who's a professor at York University, who came and did some research in our library about a Black horologist and jeweler in Harlem. And then he ended up giving a talk for us, which you can watch on our website if you're interested. And then on the right, we have Carol Hepner, who discovered that she was the great-granddaughter of one of our founders, George Schmidt. She didn't know anything about us or who he had been or why he was so important, but we were so excited to discover the connection with our organization, and she actually gave us an amazing plaque, an honorary plaque that she had that belonged to her great-grandfather. So she came into the library and researched a couple of watches from her collection, which is something that people do a lot, actually. We've also had lots of interesting researchers on different topics. We've had a novelist who's writing a character who's a watchmaker and really wanted to have that historical background. We have a cartoonist for the New Yorker who comes in every week because he just likes to have some inspiration relating to clocks and watches. We have had cast and crew members from the HBO show The Gilded Age, because if you watched it this season, you'll know that they had an arc involving clock repair, watch repair, and also had a character who ended up joining our organization under its German name, the Uhrmacher Verein. But most of the people we have at the library are casual visitors. Most of them are walk-ins. We have a sign that says open to the public. They see our sign, they are intrigued, and they come in. And I try to keep books out on the table, on the main table in our reading room, that are going to be interesting to casual visitors. I would say definitely George Daniels watchmaking is up there in terms of what people are interested in, but I kind of rotate it out depending on what people are using. And we had 776 visitors in 2023. This year, we have had 542 visitors since the start of this year. So I think we're definitely going to beat last year, which is very exciting. I also try to bring people into the library who cannot visit New York, which is a lot of people, obviously. One of the ways I do this is through blog posts and articles about the collection. So they're published on our website and in our newsletter, and then they're syndicated on Hodinkee, which is a popular watch website for those of you who aren't familiar. So these are all some recent articles that I've written about the collection, although this one was written by my intern, which it says when you read it, but the rest of them are all by me. So you can kind of see I try to cover everything. I try to cover interesting materials, our collection. This is about veteran watchmakers. This is about the history of the calendar, women in horology, lots of different topics. Try to keep it fresh. I think this month is going to be something about the Olympics, Olympic timing. And other ways that we're expanding, this is our new storage room. We got the lease on this room in 2023. And right now it houses periodicals and ephemera. So it's things like postcards, pamphlets, puzzles, parts catalogs. We even have things like coasters and t-shirts, a few things like that. So this material wasn't organized at all when we got it. I wish it had been, but it wasn't. So we made a lot of progress, and you can see in this picture we're in the process of sorting it and making it more available to researchers because we want everybody to be able to access the material, obviously. This is a long-term process. As you know, it can be very intensive work, and so we needed to hire more help. A lot of work for one person. We hired an intern to work 10 hours a week from January to May 2024. Basically, we made a posting on the Pratt Institute listserv looking for a student in library and information science who could work for us a few hours a week as part of an internship. And we hired Sinjin Karp as our intern. He is the one on the right. And he's already made a huge impact with his skills in archival processing and cataloging and research assistance. And formerly, he worked in other archival roles. He worked at the American Numismatic Society, so coins, clocks, watches, there's a connection there. And in his previous career, he was a software developer. And he was so good at the job that we've now managed to hire him full time. So Sinjin is now our assistant librarian, and he's been keeping the library open for the past couple days while I've been here. And we don't always look that nice. That is a picture from our annual gala in April. And then the other people in the picture, you can see Carolina, our deputy director on the left, Nicholas Manousos, our executive director, and me, of course. So these are some of the ideas we have for the library going forward. We would love to have a circulating library. That's something that the NAWCC does, I know. We would love to have a sub-collection for lending. This would probably just be for members at first. And I should mention that if you're interested in adding a book to our collection, if you have something that you think we might not have, you should also get in touch because we're open to it, especially if it's something that we don't already have. And we are planning to have additional internships. Just because we hired the last one full-time doesn't mean we will never need an intern again. So we're hoping to have an additional intern to work on more archival processing, to work on outreach and other tasks. We would love to have younger kids in the library. I've mentioned a lot of class visits, but those have all been college students pretty much. So we would love to have elementary schoolers, middle schoolers, and high schoolers. And we've definitely been brainstorming ideas about how to engage them with the collection and the exhibits we have. We definitely are always working on the preservation and conservation of our rare materials. And we have various digitization initiatives already going with the Watch Library Foundation. So they're another nonprofit based in Switzerland, and they collaborate with a bunch of different horological organizations to put digitized material online, mainly periodicals and rare books. So we've been working with them. We already have our newsletters on their website digitized, and we would love to be adding more things. We're working on some periodicals right now. So we're really excited about the direction the library is going. I think we've achieved a lot in just a couple of years. We were really starting from the ground up, and it's been so exciting to see how the library is growing and how many people are using it every day. So that is the note I'd like to end on. So definitely get in touch with me. I'm very easy to reach. You can email me anytime. And I would be happy to answer your questions. Thank you.